Hi everyone, in this class you're going to learn the core skills of web development, which are HTML, CSS and JavaScript, of course, by creating a website/web application. This is a step-by-step class including best practices and industry standards, also industry tips, but also my personal tips and tricks how to create websites and how to create web applications using HTML and CSS, of course. Now, this class is for beginners and intermediate programmers, but it is not for advanced programmers. So if you're advanced, please don't take this class. My name is Norbert PM. I am a self-taught web developer for over 10 years. I also teach web development for over 5 years with courses like this and tutorials. I also run my personal YouTube channel, a podcast, a website, and my blog where I post tutorials with tips and tricks and also the latest tech news. By taking this class, you're going to learn HTML, the hypertext markup language. You're also going to learn CSS, the cascading style sheet, and JavaScript, which is, well, the programming language of the web. But that's not all. We are going to learn how to create HTML files and how to create the essential HTML tags, also add IDs, classes, and specific properties to them. Then we're going to learn how to create CSS files, link them up to the HTML file, and style the HTML file using their tags and selecting them by either tag name, ID name, class, or their properties even. We're also going to use CSS variables, learn how to create CSS variables, and learn how to interchange them in order to have more code flexibility. And then we're going to create a JavaScript file and also learn a bit of JavaScript. You're going to learn how to create variables, how to access DOM elements, how to change DOM elements, and also how to insert new DOM elements into the website. Of course, we're also going to learn how to create and initialize functions, learn to use conditionals and logical operators. And after we grabbed onto the DOM elements, for example, like buttons and input tags and form elements, we're going to learn how to add to them multiple event listeners. And at the very end, we are going to revisit our code and do something called refactoring. Refactoring is the way where we programmers make our code more efficient by reducing redundancy, repetitive code, and well, you're just going to have to wait and see. Now, this class also includes a project at the very end, because real learning happens when you apply what you learned. The class project is to recreate the web application, but of course to add your own magic to it. So please check out the description of the project. So I hope you're excited, and let's get started. In this project, we're going to use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to create this web application that is going to calculate the discount depending on the quantity or on the amount of shoes that we're going to buy. A short demonstration will be if I type in here, for example, 2 pairs of shoes, click add, then the price will be 2 times the initial price, which is this right here, equals this right here. Now, if I would increase it, as it says here, for 10% discount to 3 pairs, then I'm going to get a 10% discount, and this is going to be automatically calculated here. If I go to 4, then the discount is still 10%, but if I go to 5, then the discount will be 15%. Now, even 8 will still give me a 15% discount, but as soon as I reach 10 pairs, which are a lot of pairs, I'm going to get 20%. Now, above 10, for example, 22, will still result in a 20% discount. In order to create this application, we're going to use regular HTML, CSS. Of course, we are going to use some variables in CSS in order to make the design more flexible. You can then later on change that, and the code is down in the description below. And as always, we're going to use for JavaScript variables, select elements from the DOM, add event listeners, logical operators, functions, the whole package. So hope you're excited, and let's get started with the project. Before we get started to write any kind of code, we need 2 things. We need a code editor and we need a web browser, because we want to see our code after we're done editing it, how it would look in a real web browser. Now, I'm going to use Google Chrome for this specific class, but you can use whatever web browser you wish. My recommendation is still Google Chrome, and on number 2, it would be Firefox. But this is just my personal recommendation. Please use whatever web browser you want. If you need to get Google Chrome, just go to Google and type in Google Chrome, and you should get access to Google Chrome. Now, depending on the country, you're going to get a different language, but you can also set it just to English if you wish so. The next thing that we need is a code editor. There are many code editors out there. My personal preference and also the top code editor at the moment is Visual Studio Code from Microsoft. In order to get Visual Studio Code, you can type in Visual Studio Code into Google, and we should get to Visual Studio Code's webpage using this link right here. You can also just go to download, but I want to show you something first of all. Depending on the operating system that you are on, it will automatically detect it and give you the right version of Visual Studio Code. Now I'm on a Mac, so this is why I'm going to choose Mac. Now it will ask you where to download this, so just download it and then unpack it. This will extract Visual Studio Code for me, but obviously I already have it installed. So what I'm going to show you next are my favorite extensions for Visual Studio Code. Now, if you have it installed, the installation process is pretty much straightforward, so I'm not going to go over that part. But after you have it installed, please run Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to type into my Spotlight, Visual Studio and Code. This should start Visual Studio Code for you, and this should be what you see, an empty text editor. Now on the left side, you're going to have this extension tag. This is actually the Explorer, the navigation part, and we have the Explorer tab. You can close it and open it up. Search tag, close it and open it up. Source control, we don't need this, and run, we don't need this. Also because we run our code in the browser. This is not Python, we don't need a console. Now let's go to extensions, and you're going to need one essential extension that's going to be Live Server. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to see here a installation button, only a uninstall. Now please install this, and you should after that see down here a go live. Now this will only take effect when you have a index.html file. We're going to see this just in a couple of seconds. And this extension right here creates a server on your PC. Now it's not going to take up too many resources, so don't worry about it. And as a bare minimum, this is what you would need in order to create your own website and start coding. So let's get started. Alright, so let's get started by creating our very first index.html file. For this, we need a code editor. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. Also, please have all of the extensions installed. And after opening up Visual Studio Code, you're probably going to see this. Now you can either open a folder, but I'm going to create one on my desktop. So I'm just going to drag this to the right side, right click, open new, create new folder. And let's just call it discount app, or you can call it discount website, whatever you want to call it. Now grab onto this folder and drag it in here, not here, but in here. Okay, and this is going to open up our folder. Now I'm going to maximize this once again, and within this folder you can either create the file here by clicking on new file, or just right click new file, or you can even create it in your folder. But what I'm going to do here is open this up. I'm going to show you something. So if I create a file here, I'm going to call this index.html, .html being the extension of the file. Also Visual Studio Code is going to automatically recognize this. And after I hit enter, you're going to see this file created right here. All right. So why do we call it index? Well, because when the web crawlers are going to look for your website, they're going to first look for this index page. You can obviously have multiple pages in one website. There are web pages, and the entirety of them makes up a website, but always the index.html file will be the point of entry. Let's just call it that. Now, because Visual Studio Code has a lot of extensions and also a lot of shortcuts, we're going to click right in here, hold down Shift and exclamation mark, and this should give us a little boilerplate here. You can just tab or hit enter. This will open up a HTML5 doc type. You can tell that's a HTML5 doc type because of the exclamation mark, doc type, and then HTML. Within here, we have our main HTML tag up and down, meaning that this is an opening, this is a closing tag. Then we have a head, which is going to have our main information about the web page. And then we're going to have the title of the page right here. All right, so in order to open up our website, first of all, let's hit save. We can either go live, click the go live button down here, right click in the page and open with live server. It's going to do the same thing. Or just click on the file here, which is going to open up a website, and it's empty because we didn't type anything in there. Now, as you can see, it is now running from user Norbert desktop, so far and so on. So I'm going to close this up and right click, open with live server. And now you will see that is, wait just a second, now you will see it's going to run on a port. It's going to run on its actual server. You can see up here the IP address, the port that is running on 5500, and the index. Now this IP address, don't worry about it. it's a static IP. You can't access it via the internet, so nobody can access this IP address excepting you. Is the IP address generated by this little server right here. Okay, so let's go back to our web page. So it's pretty much empty. Now I'm going to move my editor here, and in order for us to see much more, I'm going to move the web page to the right side. Okay, so we have our editor to the left, we have a web page to the right, and now if I would change the title, the document here, as you can see up here, it says document. I'm going to change this to discount app. Hit save, and you can see it's also changed up here, meaning that, well, the website is live, and whatever we type in here will be then shown on our web page. And just as a reference, also I'm going to open up the finished application just to have a reference to it. So here's a little web application. It's also working. You can add multiple shoes to it, multiple pairs. The discount will be applied according to the pairs, to the number of pairs. If I only have 3 pairs here, then the discount will be only 10%. So you can see up here we have a really large title. Now this is achieved by using either H1, which I would suggest always to use, because the H1 is the greatest title tag, and it also should be used only once in a page, not in the entire website, but once in a page. So if you type in here H1, Emmet will also recognize it. Hit enter. You can type in here promotion between the opening and closing tags, promotion app. Okay, let's hit save. If we go back to our web page, well, we will see promotion app just appeared. Now also let's really quickly do a comment. In order to do a comment, you're going to hold down Control and then the /, which is left to your right shift key. So if I type in this, it's going to comment in and comment out whatever element I'm choosing. And if I hit save, that element is going to disappear, because comments do not appear on a web page. They will only appear in the code. For example, I'm going to comment this back in. I'm going to create here a comment, Control /, and then type in comment. Hit save, and we'll see that the comment does not appear here, but it does appear in my code. Also, if we right click, inspect the page now, it's going to be smushed together a bit. But if we go to the body, then H1, you can see up here, and then up here we'll see our comment. If I change the comment from code, hit save, go to the body again, and we'll see the comment appearing here. Okay, I'm going to close this up and also zoom this in a bit. There we go. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to create is a main tag. So just type in main, hit enter. The main tag being the, well, as the name says, the main tag is going to surround most of our main elements. After the main tag, you can have a footer. You can also have sections, but I would suggest that everything that is relevant to the main page should be in the main tag. Now, for example, if I want to include here a section in the main tag, then I'm going to type in a section. And in that section, I'm going to have an image tag. I'm going to type in image. The image tag will have a source. And for this, we're going to create, first of all, a folder here with image, and then drag and drop the image that is provided to you, which in our case will be a SVG image. It's going to look like this. Close it up. And we can add as a source, we're going to type in a dot /, meaning that we're going to go up here. And then in this container, so we're going to select image container and then select the SVG. So just type in exactly the file name, which is hi for dash tops, and dot the extension of the file SVG. And if we hit save, you're going to see that little shoe there. You can also type in an alternate attribute to this. Let's say shoe. And if this wouldn't be here, then we're going to see the alternate text describing what the image should be. So I'm going to paste this back in here, and there we go. Underneath our image, now we're going to pass in a form tag. We're going to have no action, so I'm going to just delete this. And within our form, we're going to create a button tag. Then we're going to copy this button tag 3 times, 1, 2, 3. And after the very first button tag, I'm going to create an input tag. Hit save. And you're going to see here, because we don't have any kind of text, we have here a little button, then an input tag. If we click on this, you'll see we can type in here stuff, and then this button, then this button. So the first button is going to have a minus, just as we have here in our finished project. Oops, this is zoomed in too much. Boom, boom, boom. We're going to have this minus button, then this plus button, and then this add button. So minus, then plus, and then type in here, add. And for that little basket right here, well, we're going to take care of this later on. So let's hit save. And there we go. We have 3 buttons. If we click on them, you're going to see the page refreshing. And this is because one of the properties of the form which is trying to submit. And we're going to take care of this later on when we're going to work with JavaScript. So we have one section which is containing an image and a form. The form has a couple of buttons and it has an input tag with a type of text because we're typing in for now text. But we're going to change the type of this input tag. There are multiple types that the input tag can have. We're going to change this to number. Now, what this does, you're going to see first of all here a couple of arrows appearing. But if you type in here some kind of text, it won't let us. What we can do is type in now numbers. Perfect. Because that's exactly what we need. We want to be able to type in here numbers and not text. This is also preventing the user to type in anything else than numbers. Now, after this section tag, let's create another section tag. And after that section tag, also let's go into the section tag and type in here comment of table, meaning that we need to add a table here. And after the section tag, we're going to create another div, which is going to be our output. But we're going to take care of this just in a couple of seconds. Now, next up, let's add a couple of classes and IDs to our tags. Now, what are classes and IDs used for? First of all, IDs are the highest hierarchy in the naming convention, meaning that there is something called specificity to the code, meaning how specifically we can access something. Although this sounds a bit confusing, don't worry about it. It's going to get much clearer just in a couple of seconds. So let's add our very first class. In order to add a class, we're going to go into the opening tag, always the opening tag, then hit a space, and a class is actually a property of a tag. You're also going to see the color changing. So if I type in class, then this is going to define the class. So the class is equal to, and whatever you pass into these two quotation marks will be the name of the class. So if I type in here container, then the main tag has the class of container. Now, classes can be then later on accessed throughout CSS and JavaScript especially. Now let's add another class. We're going to go down to a section tag and let's say class, and it's going to be a grid dash item. And we're also going to add this grid item class to the next section tags. Remember the opening. This is the opening tag. Click in here and class and grid item. Now before I type in grid item, I'm going to show you a pro tip. So I'm going to delete this one and that one, and now I'm going to click in once here in my section tag and once holding down the option key on a Mac or the alt key on a PC. Click in here, so you're going to see both of them selected. What this means is that you can now type in here class and grid dash item, and there you go. You just made yourself more efficient by typing in the same thing in two separate places. Now you can do this obviously with multiple tags, and as long as you hold down the option or the alt button, you can just click through and type in multiple places your text. Now we're going to exercise this once again. We're going to go to our button, our minus button, and our plus button here. Then first of all, a space, because it's not going to be a tag. If you type something after the button, you need to have the space in order to access another property of the element, which is the button can have different types. Now, the type of this button will be button. And why am I specifically changing this to button? Well, you saw before that if I clicked on the minus button, the page was refreshing. Now, if you click on the minus and the plus button, the page is not refreshing anymore. But if you click on the add button, you will see the page refreshing, meaning that the form is again submitting. Now, because I specifically told the button that it is a button, is no longer submitting the form. What is submitting the form? Well, let's just click into our next button and add to this the type of submit. And this is what this button will do. It will submit the information that we're going to add in our input tags to the form, and the form will submit it then to a server. We're not using a server right now, so we're just going to leave it as it is. Now let's add to this input tag a ID. And we can add an ID by typing in ID, then equal, and within a quotation marks, we're just going to type in Q. You can also type in quantity. I'm going to keep it short. Now, momentarily, you'll see that the input tag is empty. Normally, you can add a placeholder to the input tag, and whatever you type in here, let's say quantity, this will appear here in the input tag as a placeholder for what the user should type in here. So if I start typing in numbers, the placeholder will disappear. But we're not going to use a placeholder for this. We're going to use a value. So next, if I type in here value, and I'm going to assign to this now the value of 0, you will see that the placeholder disappears, and this will always have the value 0 as long as I don't start changing it. Now, because I can also go down with minus, and I can go up with my values, I can type in minus 20, blah, blah, blah. I want to stop the user from doing this, and the input tag has another property called min. Now, this signifies the minimum value that this input tag can have, and we're going to type in 0 for it. And hit save, and we can now no longer go underneath the value of 0, and we will always stay within a positive value. Now, if I would type in here max value, let's say 100, then it would stop at 100. Just give the example. Let's say the max value would be 20. So if I would start to type in here 20, oops, just a second, 20, and try to go up from this 10th value, it will not let me. Also, if I go down, I can only go down to 0. Okay, so pretty simple. Now I'm going to delete the max value, and I'm also going to, no, I'm going to leave it this way. Okay, so hope you understood this. Next up, let's add a couple of classes to our two buttons here. So once again, I'm going to go to the minus button, hit space. No, wait, we are professionals here. So the minus button, then click once here, then click once to the plus button, space, and let's just type in class is equal to. Now I'm going to type in here minus, but I'm going to then escape and go down here and change this to plus. So the first button is going to have the class of minus, and the second button is going to have the class of plus. Pretty simple. And let's finish this by adding down here another ID. To the very last tag, we're going to add the ID of output, meaning that if you take a look in our finished project, this right here is actually our output. And if there's nothing in here, for example, let's do a refresh. If there's nothing in here, then nothing will be out. So this output is momentarily hidden because it's just an empty tag. But this is where we're going to insert our results from our JavaScript file. So the last thing that I want to do here is actually add the table. Now, tables are pretty much less and less used in traditional HTML and traditional web development. But still, I want you to have this information. And also, in this particular instance, it's extremely handy. So let's create a table tag by typing in table. Again, table tags have an opening and closing tag. And a table, if you take a look in our finished project, a table has a head, so a table head, which consists of a row. This is a row and this is a column. So let's start off by using a TR, which stands for table row. And then within here, we're going to have a TH. We're going to type in here quantity with a capital Q. And then I'm going to copy and paste this and change this to price / discount. Okay, let's hit save and let's go back to our project. I'm going to see this right here. Now we're going to add style just in a couple of seconds to this little project. This is why it's looking so awful, but just stick with the project for now. Okay, next up we need another table row. Now let's just think about it. How many table rows do we have? Well, we have one up here, then one down here, making them 2, then 3, 4, and 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let me give you another tip. Use the power of Emmet. Emmet is built into Visual Studio Code. For example, if you would type in TR, meaning table row, and then multiply this by 4, because we're missing 4, we're going to see Emmet showing you here 4 more table rows. Now, if you hit enter, you're going to have 4 more table rows. But I'm going to do something different. I'm going to Control or Command Z and delete this multiply by 4, do a greater than sign, meaning this is going to include a TD times 2, and then hold down Shift, tap the back arrow, add this entire thing to a parenthesis, and then multiply it by 4. And there we go. We have 4 table rows with 2 times their content. So let's start adding some content to it. Let's type in 1. Hit save. You're going to see on the left side appearing 1, then $99.99. Hit save. You're going to see appear it on the right side. Okay. Now let's add information to all of our rows here and columns. So this is going to be greater than 3. Then the next one is going to be minus 10%. Then the next one is going to be greater than 5 minus 15%. And the last one is going to be greater than 10, which is going to have a discount of minus 20%. Okay, there we go. We have our tables set up. Now I want to add classes to these three elements of the columns. So how can I do that? Well, I'm going to click in the very first one, hold down Alt or Option, click to the next and click to the next, hit space and add class, and the class name will be discount. And we're going to take care of this later on when we're going to make them, as you can see here, green. So only these three will be green. Okay, now let's move on to styling. So in order to style our application, here to style our web page, we need to create a CSS file. In order to create a CSS file, we're going to go to the left side, right click, new file, and we're going to call this style.css. Now, style is just naming convention. Normally everyone uses style.css. You can also use main.css and so forth and so on. But main.css, so the name of main, would be normally used when you have multiple CSS files and you're importing different styles. That is something outside of the scope of this particular class, and you would normally use it in another programming language called Sass, which is a CSS with superpowers, kind of. Okay, now create the file. Let's hit enter. Now, in order for this file to take effect, let's just say we're going to take out all of the margins and padding from the entire web page. We're going to use something called a global selector. Because in CSS, in order to add styling to something, you need to select something. You saw that we created element tags, we added classes to them, we added IDs to them, and this is because we want to make things easier to be selected. You can see we have two section tags, we have one main tag, we have one H1 tag, but we do have multiple button tags and they do have different classes. This is because I want to be able to select them individually. Because if you would type in here, for example, a button tag, this is how you select a tag, then open and close curly brackets, and let's say that the background color of them should be red, then all of the buttons will have a red background color. Now you don't see this taking effect. Why is this? Well, because you have to link up your CSS file with your HTML file. So let's go back to our HTML file. In order to link up a CSS file to an HTML file, you're going to go up in the head, right before the title, click here, and then type in link, which is just a link tag, and as a href, meaning the reference will be the CSS file that we just created. And now if you take a look at your web page, and if you hit save, obviously, you will see that all of the buttons have a red background. Now let's say that I want to change the background only for the add button. Let's also take a look at this add button. Now, is there something specific about this add button? Yes, it's the only button that has the type of submit. Now we can also select types in CSS. So if I would go in here and say that the button, in order to select the property from the button, for example, like the type, I'm going to open and close square brackets, then the property of type, and now I'm going to choose the type that I want to select, and this was submit. Now open and close curly brackets, and we will add to this a different color. And the color for this button, so the background color, will be a green color. But I'm not going to type in simply green. I'm going to use a different type of naming convention for colors, and that is a hexadecimal color. For this, we're going to type in hash and 1D. Hexadecimal numbers always consist of 6 spaces, and it's a combination between letters and numbers. So 1DC 200, and this is going to give me a green color. And I will see that only this button will change the background color to green. Now let's go up here and do a general reset. Now what is a general reset? General reset is when you're going to take up all of the margins and all of the paddings of all elements. What I mean by that, well, for this I'm going to make our web page a bit larger. Let's go here, right click, inspect. You're going to see this inspector tag appear. And if element is not selected for you, then please go to elements. You can also go to the console. We're going to use the console in JavaScript just in a couple of minutes. But have the element tag selected. And now if you click on this select icon, and if I would go to the H1, you will see that this right here has a blue background and then followed by orange and orange underneath of it. If I click on it and go down here, going to see our pretty box model. Everything in CSS consists of the box model. Before CSS, well, when there was no CSS and no styling, you can remember those old pages. I don't think that you can remember. But as you can see, elements have already margin and padding added to them. In our case, the H1 element, which is this one right here, only has margin added to it. And the margin is 21.44 pixels to the top and 21.44 pixels to the bottom. If I would change it here, let's change it to 0, hit enter, you see it's going to go a bit further up to the top. If I would change the bottom value to 0, that is going to also push this to the top, meaning that the H1 no longer has margins. Now I'm not going to go too deep into this right now, but just remember that elements have automatic margin and padding assigned to them, and if we want to reset everything, then we need to use a style selector. Now, first of all, everything that you just did here, as soon as you close it up and hit a refresh, you'll see that it's gone, because we just edited within the page, not within the code. Everything that you edit within the page will not take effect or not stay there after a refresh. This is why you could edit some pages on the internet, but they won't take effect on the server, only for you and in that instance. So let's do here, we have to go to the right side again. Let's make this smaller. Let's do here general reset. Just type in star, then open and close curly brackets, and let's say margin. You assign to the margin the value of 0. Margin is a property. Another property will be padding. Hit enter, and padding will also be 0. This, as you can see, did a general reset. Everything is now smushed together. Now we can also select another element, which is the HTML element. And when we're going to style this element, this is going to apply style to everything that is in the web page. So let's type in here HTML, and let's change its font family to just sans serif. As you can see, the font family of the web page just changed after we hit a save. Now also let's do a reset for the entire font size. We're going to do here font size of 1 EM. 1 EM meaning that everything, also if you just hover over something, it's going to explain it to you. So indicate the desired height of graphic form and font. For scalable fonts, the font size is a scale factor applied to EM unit of the font. Now I normally use RAM because RAM is much simpler. It just takes the base font of your web page, which is normally 1.6 pixels in actually not 1.6, 16 pixels in Google Chrome and most of the web browsers. And we will always multiply that. If I would, for example, do 2 RAM, then it's going to be 16 pixels times 16 pixels times 2, resulting in 42 pixels. Now we can also increase the line height. This is another property of the entire web page. So every text will have a line height of 1.5. You can see that decreases the distance between text. Now I also want to add a general color to our text in the web page. For this, I'm going to type in color, and again, I'm going to use a hexadecimal color, and this time it's going to be a hash 073455. Now, why are we using hexadecimal colors? There are also RGB colors and so on and so on, but I want to have a very specific color. If I just type in here color and blue, the blue color is a blue color. I cannot go lighter or darker on the blue color. Actually, I can do. I can type in light blue. But again, this is a specific color. Now I want to have more control over my color, as this is actually the same color as this boot is. So if I comment this back out, you will see that the entire text of the web page has exactly the same color as the well, as our little boot here has. Now, the last thing I want to do is change the background color of the entire web page to white. So let's type in here white. Or you could just type in hash and FFF. This is completely white. Now, why am I doing this? Isn't this white? Yes, it is. But some browsers do have a bit of a different white. So this is how I'm just telling the web browser that you should have always this white color. Okay, now let's also style our container. Remember our container, class of container, and this is also showing you how we can select classes, is wrapped around, you can also close and open up here specific tags, is wrapped around our entire application. So when we're going to style this main tag accessing the container class, and I did give this the name of container because it contains everything. Then we're going to style everything that is in our web page. So let's grab onto our very first class, and in order to style a class, you need to have the dot selector first of all, and then the name of the class, container. Now, first property that we're going to assign to this container will be a margin. As you saw up here, when we selected margin, it selected it and added the value of 0. Well, actually margin has 4 values. It has the, let me open, right click on the web page, inspect, and let's go to our body here, and let's go to our container. We go down to our box model, you will see that this right here is a all-around margin. Now, when I typed in here 0, it gave 0 to everything. But I could select now top, right, bottom, and left. And it always goes in, well, clockwise, in a clockwise direction. If I would now want to select the top and bottom, then I would need to add the first value here, let's say 0. And left and right, let's say I'm going to add 20 pixels. And we'll see now that 0 is assigned to top and bottom, and left and right will be 20 pixels. If I want to change this to 4 values, then I would start off with 0, then 2 pixels to the right, 1 pixel to the bottom, and 20 pixels to the left. And you can see here 0, 2, 1, and left. But what we're going to do here is change this to also auto, left and right, which will make our container then center everything. Now we're not done quite yet. We also need to add to this a max width, and we're going to add to this a max width of 80 pixels. Now what does this mean? Well, our application is now in the center of the page, having a max width of 800 pixels, and it has the margins left and right auto, meaning that it's going to always calculate what is the left and right margin and push our application into the center of the page. Okay, let's go back with it. And also going to add a padding to it. Padding just meaning that is, and padding of 1 rem. If we inspect this very quickly once again and go to our container, go down to the box model, you will see it has now a 16 padding, exactly as I said, 1 rem, meaning it's going to take the base pixel size of the web page, which is 16 pixels, and add it all around the element. Now there's a big difference. Margin is outside of the element and padding is inside of the element, meaning it's going to assign space within the element itself, and margin will assign space outside the element. Okay, let's close this up, and now let's add the system of the display of the element, which is going to be display and grid. There are 2 systems, actually multiple systems, but 2 main systems which are used in web development. One of them is grid and the other one is flex. And when we want to display something as grid, for example in our case, we want to display these elements in 1 and 2 columns. Now in order to display something as grid, we first need to type in the property of display, then grid, and then we need to assign grid template and columns, meaning that it's going to assign this template to all of the elements that are in our grid container. If we take a look in our HTML, the class of container is assigned to this main tag. The main tag has actually been, let's say that the main tag is a parent, and the parent has 2 children. Those 2 children, those 2 main children, are these 2 section tags and also this little output right here. So it actually has 3 children. Now did add to the section tag grid items, I just want to show you that these items are now part of the grid parent. So if I would assign to the grid the template columns of 400 pixels and 400 pixels, then you will see that our elements here are now split up in 2 columns, each of them having 400 pixels. Let me just demonstrate this. Right click, inspect, and this will be much visual. If I go to our main container, you will already see that it says here grid, and you can see that with the dollar lines. If I go away from it, it won't be displayed anymore. But if you click on this grid, you will see the grid items. So one item is here and one item is here, meaning section and this section. Now, as you can see, they're taking up the entire width of those 800 pixels. I just took 800 pixels and divided it by 2, resulting 2 columns of 400 and 400. What I can now do, and what I would suggest for you to do, this is just my personal opinion, when you want to split something up into exactly 2 equal columns, then use 1fr and 1fr, meaning that each element will take up one fraction of the container. And because it has 800 pixels, we click inspect. Once again, body, the container, click on the grid, is going to have exactly the same width, 400 and 400. Okay, we're done with this part, so let's move on. Next, I want to show you something really cool. We could actually have variables in CSS. And variables are extremely useful because, for example, this color right here and this color right here are two main colors that we're using within our entire website. We're going to use them multiple times. It would be much easier for us to create variables because variables are reusable snippets in our code. Also, if I would change later on the value of the variable, it will change my entire web page look. For example, the client will come to me and say that I want to have a different color for the main color. Then you could just change that color and it will apply to every single instance in the web page. Now, in order to create variables, we need to access the root selector. So hyphen root, and let's go in here. In order to declare a variable, you need to do a set dash, and then type in the name of the variable. In our case, this is going to be primary dash color, and now hyphen, and now the value, which is going to be, well, this value right here. This is going to be our primary color. So I could just copy it, paste it in here, and close it up with our semicolon. So in order to apply a variable, instead of this right here, the value, we're going to type in var, meaning variable, and within parentheses, we're going to then add the variable that we want to use, in our case, primary color. And if I hit save, you will see absolutely no change happening here. But for example, if I would hover over this color and change this to, say, this color, hit save, it's going to change the color everywhere where it was applied. So easy as that. This is why we use variables. Now let's add a secondary color. Let's type in here, secondary and color. And for the secondary color, we're going to go with this little green color right here, paste it in here, and replace this color with var. Also, if you just type in the name, secondary color, is going to add and wrap the variable around it. So simple as that. This is why we use variables. You see how helpful they are. Now let's apply a variable to also h1 here. Let's also style our h1. I'm going to go above the buttons. Let's just keep this in order. So the h1 will, first of all, let's increase this font size. Let's say it's going to increase the font size with 5 rem. Then let's also change the font weight to normal. Let's add a bit of a margin. And we already learned that I could add margin to the top and bottom. So if I type in here 2 rem and then 0, meaning that it's going to add margin to the top and the bottom of the element. Let's also add text alignment. Now text alignment can be left, right, and center. So I'm going to go with center in our case because it is a title. I want to have everything in the center of the page. And that's basically it. I could add the color, just copy this, add it down here in order to be more specific that this h1 will have the color. But because our h1 is wrapped within the HTML element, it's included with it, it will automatically take the color of its parent element. Okay, so next up, let's start styling our form. In order to style our form, let's first of all grab onto the form tag. Because we have only one form, we could just use the form tag. If we had multiple forms, then I would suggest to give it either a ID or a class. This is just my personal opinion. Now, next up, let's use for the form a margin to the top of 2 rem, meaning that we're going to push this down from our shoe so that we don't step on our form. We're going to push it down with 2 rem. Remember, 2 rem means 16 pixels times 2 is 32 pixels. Next, let's take care of our input tag. In order to style the input tag, we need to select the input tag. Again, we have only one input tag. This is why I'm using the input tag selector and not some specific class. Open and close curly brackets. And let's change its width. With the width property, we can change the width of any element. In our case, we're going to assign to this a width of 80 pixels. Let's also increase the font size that is in there by typing in font size and assigning this 1 rem font size. Let's also add a padding, a all-around padding, meaning that we're going to have more space around this 0. Let's type in here padding and 0.4 and rem. Okay, let's also add a margin of 0.5 rem. And now we can also change the border color of this input tag by typing border then how thick should the color be? If I would do here 3 pixels and the type of the border solid, because I could also do dashed, then it's going to look something like this. Now this is extremely horrible. So we're going to leave it 1 pixel solid, and it's going to automatically assume its initial color, which is, well, black, but I'm going to change it to the var and primary color, and they're going to have that nice blue color again. Now I don't like the edges of the input text, so what I could do is change the border radius to 5 pixels, meaning that I'm going to have a bit of a rounded border. And also I want to change the text alignment to the center, meaning that the 0 is going to be pushed to the center of the page. Now we still have these up and down arrows, which I hate. I just hate them. I'm going to take care of this later on because I don't want the user to access my arrows from here, access the values from here. I want him to access it from these 2 buttons. Also, this will be much easier than to add event listeners in JavaScript to these buttons and also take care, change the value then automatically from here. Okay, now the last thing that I want to take care here is our button. I'm going to add to this button a general style, meaning that all of the buttons, as you will see just in a couple of minutes, will be styled according to this styling. So let me delete this background red. We don't need it. I'm going to first of all increase the font size of the text of the button to 1 rem. Then I'm going to add padding of 0.5 rem, margin of 0.5 rem. When I'm hovering over a button, you can see that my cursor is still that arrow. Now I want to change this to a pointing finger, and we can change this by using the cursor and pointer property. Okay, and now you can see it's a little finger that's pointing. Now let's have the same border radius as our little input tag in here, so we could either copy this and paste it in here, or you could just type it in. All of my buttons should have the same background of this blue color, so I'm going to change the background color, or add the background color actually, to the var and primary color. Now remember, a button with the type of submit still retains its green color because it's specifically the specificity of the selector is higher than a general button selector. Okay, let's continue on and change the color of the text to white color, or just hash FFF, because remember, it could be a different white. And now I'm going to take out the margins of the buttons, the outline, and the borders. So let's say border, none, outline, none, and margin, none. Now let's increase the width of the button to 100 pixels and the font weight of the buttons to 600 pixels. Now for more specific styling, we're going to take care of this a bit later on. But for now, let's also style our table here. Okay, next up, let's style our table. But before we do that, my personal recommendation would be when you're leaving a specific section to add a comment. So in our case, this would be table. Up here, we had our form. And then, well, you could leave this as it is because it's pretty much self-explanatory. So let's go down to our table. We grab onto the table tag and let's change the borders to collapse. And we're going to add collapsed it. Meaning, you didn't see it right here because I did create here general reset, but tables usually have a border and it has a thickness to it. And this messes up, it has a 1 pixel or something like that thickness to it. And this kind of messes up our spacing and styling. So this is why I always collapse our borders for my tables. But as I said, I'm not usually using that many tables. I would create then a grid system and out of divs and use grid system or flex to create a table because they're much flexible, as the name says, when we're creating responsive websites or responsive web applications. They're mostly used on phones and they need to be responsive. When you turn your phone in a specific orientation, then it needs to resize itself. And tables are pretty rigid. You cannot resize the tables. So let's now increase its width to 100%. And 100% meaning that it's going to take up 100% of its container. Remember, our container is this section tag right here. Take a look in our second section tag is this section tag with the class of grid item, which takes up 400 pixels. Now, if I want my table to spread out the entire 400 pixels, Then I need to add to it a width of 100 pixels, and the width of 100 pixels meaning that it's going to take up 100%, or not 100 pixels. So about 100% of its parent container, and the parent container is the section tag, and the section tag has 400 pixels. So I hope I was clear with this one. Okay, next up, let's do a text alignment to the center. I think will be nice and centered in the page. Let's also change the font size to 1.4 rem, and that's pretty much it for this part. Next, I'm going to change the table head. I'm going to change its background color to the primary color, and obviously we now need to change the color of the text within there to a #FFF. Okay, and then let's also add a bit of a padding. There's just two little space in there, so 0.5 rem, and there we go. That looks much better. Now remember that we added to these table columns right here the class of discount. Now let's select the TDs with the class of discount, so dot class discount, the class name, and now let's increase their font sizes to 1.5 rem. Let's increase the font weight to 600 pixels, actually just 600 pixels. Yeah, hey, that kind of reminds me. I had a little error there. So, okay, so now the font size is thicker, the font weight is thicker. And let's change the colors, so the color to the variable of secondary color. And there we go, now they're green. Also, I want to finish up here by styling our two buttons here. Remember, those two buttons, the button with the class of plus, and they had different classes, so one was plus and one was button with the class of minus. And what I'm trying to show you here, then you can style multiple elements by selecting them, the button, class of plus, then comma, and the next selection, button with a class of minus, and I can style out both of them. Let me just demonstrate this by adding a border radius of 50%, making it completely round, and I messed up something here. Yep, this should be plus. Plus, there we go. Now, in order to have a round border, we need to have the same width and the same height. So let's change the width to 40 pixels. And let's also copy and paste this and change the height to 40 pixels. And there we go. We have two beautiful round buttons. Next, I want to show you a pretty awesome property. Let's add a box shadow to them. In order to add a box shadow, you need to first of all specify the orientation. I'm going to go 6.15 pixels down, then 0.1 EM. I'm going to use all kinds of values here, not only pixels, but EMs, RAMs, and 0.2 RAM for the spread. And now we need to add a color to it. So I'm going to use the variable of primary color as the shadow, and there you go. You will see this little shadow appearing right here. Now we do have those shadows, but when I'm clicking on a button, I want to signify to the user that I'm doing something. So it needs to have some kind of effect. Now what we can do here is copy these two and add to them the active state. Now when we're using this active state, it signifies that when I'm pressing on the button, when the button is active, it should do something. And we're going to transform the button with the transform property and scale it down with 2%. And for this, I'm going to scale it with 98. So let's just take a look. If I click on this button, whoops, see, it's getting a bit smaller. Now let's also do something else. Let's take out the shadow. I just imagine that the button is up and the sun shines on it and it's casting a shadow, and when we're pressing the button down, the shadow should disappear. And in order to make the shadow disappear, we're going to do here box shadow, and we're going to set it to none, basically taking out the effect. Okay, you can see if I'm clicking on the button, the effect is gone. Now because it's happening a bit too abruptly, I will need to add a transition effect to it. So let's do here on the two buttons a transition, and usually you should use the all property here if you don't want to add a transition both to the active and the initial state. So we're going to add all, and the transition should take then 0.2 seconds, and it should have an effect of ease in out. Okay, so now if I click on it, you can see the effect is much smoother. If I want to increase the duration, I have to go 0.5 seconds, and woo, that's too long for me. So I'm going to go back to 2 seconds, and boom, there we go. Okay, so Also, I promised that we will get rid of these two arrows up to the right side and left. Okay, and I also promised that we're going to get rid of these arrows. Now, this is a pretty neat trick, but you need to use WebKits. Now, in order for this to work, we need to first of all specify the input. And now from the input, we need to take the type of number. And now we can use a WebKit on it. We're going to use the WebKit of inner spin bottom, comma, I'm going to copy this, paste it in, again, inner and outer spin button. Okay, let's delete that comma here. And now we can type in that WebKit appearance should be none. And also let's take out the margin because it has a margin in there. I'm going to assign this to 0. Okay, and now they're gone. Finally. I so much hate them. Okay, we're kind of done with this part. And we're also done with our CSS. We're going to come back to CSS after we created our output right here. But for now, we're done with CSS, so let's move on to JavaScript and let's make this web page with this web application actually do something. So next up, we're going to create a JavaScript file. And let's also create it. Let's call it main.js. We need to add it to our HTML file. As I said, this is the entry point. Now, in order to add the JavaScript file, you need to go outside of main, and right before the closing body tag, you will type in script with the source of main.js. You also need to add here .js. And now our file is linked up to our HTML file, so our JavaScript file. In order to demonstrate this, we're going to right click, inspect, and we're going to now click on these 3 dots here and display it down here if you don't have it displayed down here. And now we're going to select the console, also going to clear the console. And this is where, well, you can write JavaScript either within the console, and JavaScript is running in the browser on an engine. And this is why you can execute JavaScript in browsers. So if I would do here alert and pass in here a message of hi from the console, go to the end, close it up and execute it, you're going to see up here a alert. Pretty cool. Now, but we can also do here stuff. You can type in something in your JavaScript file. Actually, this is where you're executing code. And we can type in here, let's say console log, CLG, and we're going to console log here the string of hello, not world, but Norbert. And if I hit save, you're going to see down here, hello Norbert. You can also alert from Norbert. Hit save and it would be executed. And boom. So pretty cool stuff. Now, we need to grab onto a couple of elements from the DOM. What is the DOM? Well, this is the DOM, the document object model. Everything that you see in here in your website is actually the DOM. You can grab on from the DOM to elements. In order to grab onto an element, let's also delete this. Don't need it. You need to first of all assign them to a variable. You can also use them without assigning them to a variable, but if you want to use them in multiple places, I would suggest, so this is my personal opinion, I would suggest always assigning them to variable. And also, again, pro tip for me, always select elements from the DOM in the very top of your code. Because JavaScript is synchronous, meaning it's going to be executed line by line by line, the very first thing that is going to be executed as soon the file is loaded are the element selections. So let's create first of all a variable. There are 2 ways to create a variable: with the name of const or with the name of let. Now there's also var, a very, just as you saw here, var, where do we have it? Var, yes, but this is a different var. The var definition or the var naming convention of the variables is an older one, before ES6, before 2015. And I wouldn't suggest using it, mainly because it is a global variable. I would suggest you, and it can be changed. This is the very biggest difference. The value and the naming of the variable can be changed. So I would suggest using const for elements or for variables that their name will not be changed and also their value will not be changed. So let's say const form, because we're going to select now from the document. So from this document, using a specific selector, there are multiple selectors. We are going to use here 2 types of selectors. We're going to use query selectors. So query selector. And when we're selecting only one element, then we're going to use query selector. When we're selecting multiple elements, we're going to use query selector all. I'm going to show you how this works. Now, when you're selecting a tag, you just need to type in within quotation marks the tag name, form. Let me demonstrate this. I'm going to do here console log, and now I can access this variable, copy and paste it down here, and you will see in our, oops, what just happened here? There we go. It needed a bit of manual refresh. We just selected our form. So if you take a look in here, we see button, input tag, bam, 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 bam. Wow, amazing. So we just selected our form and assigned it to a variable. Now we have access to this variable within the entirety of our code. So let's create another one. Let's create here const, select another element, and we're going to select the plus button, and we're also going to select it from the document by using query selector. And because it is a class, just as we had it in CSS, we're going to add here dot and then type in the name of the class that we're selecting. So the plus button, let me demonstrate this. You can select multiple elements in the console by just typing a comma and typing plus, and we should also see, yep, form and the button with the class of plus selected now. Okay, let's do the same thing for the minus button. Just going to copy and paste this and replace this with, hold down Control. So for example, if you want to select the same name, the same text multiple times, you see if I double click on it, it's going to highlight it. And if I hold down Control or Command on a Mac and press D, it's going to select both of them. And now I can change this to minus. There we go. And now I also have minus. Let's paste it in here. Selected both of the buttons. Excellent. Another thing that we need is our input tag. And remember that we gave our input tag the ID of Q. So if I type in here const Q, this is just a naming convention. I could type in something like quantity, if I can spell quantity correctly. And I could assign this to the document dot. And now I'm going to use a different selector. Because I'm selecting a ID, you could also use query selector, but then you would need to have a hash instead of the dot. I'm going to use here the get element by ID selector, and I'm going to select here. You just need to pass in the name of that ID, which is Q. Let me demonstrate this, and there we go. We have our input selected. Okay, so we can move on to event listeners. All right, so let's start using event listeners. Now, what are event listeners? They're listening to events. How can we assign event listeners? Well, we first need to take an element, in our case, our quantity. Let's type in quantity. And in order to add an event listener to it, you need to type in dot and then add event listener. Then what should the listener listen to? What kind of event? Now we're going to open and close parentheses, and within quotations, we're going to type in the event of focus. What is focus? Well, focus is when we're focusing on an object by, example, clicking on it, not just by looking at it, but for example, if I click here in this input tag, then I'm actually focusing on it. So when I'm focusing on that element, I'm going to create a function, and that function, open and close parentheses, will then, and open and close curly brackets, take the quantity, and from the quantity, we're going to take the value. Okay? Oops, not that. So let me first of all show you what the value is. So let's say, for example, let's test if this event listener even works. So I'm going to comment this part out and console log quantity, meaning that I'm also going to comment out this part. So when we're commenting something out, it's not going to take effect. Also, you can see that JavaScript has different comments that HTML and CSS has. So 2 times / would result in a comment. So this means when I'm going to click in this input tag, it should console log the input tag, just as we showed here. If we console log quantity, it's going to give us the input tag. So let's click in it, and there we go. There's the input tag. Now, you do remember that we assigned the value of 0 to it. So let's see if we can grab out to the value. Now we have a quantity, and value is a property of this input tag. So if I would type in here dot value, then when I focus in here, it should give me 0. Then there we go, 0. Now, why are we using this? The problem is when I'm going to click in here and start typing in something, then I'm going to first of all see 0, and I don't want that. I want the quantity to be cleared as soon as I click in here. So I can do this by typing in quantity dot value, and I'm going to change the value. I'm going to manipulate the DOM. I'm going to assign the value of 0 to it. Not 0, sorry about that. A empty string, so nothing. Or we could also assign the value of null, meaning nothing. So if I click in here, it should be empty and it should only appear and it should only show me the placeholder of quantity, prompting to the user what he should do. So he can type in here, let's say 120 pairs of this shoe. Woo! Okay, so pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There are multiple event listeners, and we're going to go through each one of them. Not all of them, but we're going to take care of a couple of them. So next up, let's add an event listener to our form. Next, let's activate our forms. Let's type in here form. I'm going to grab onto the variable, then dot, again, add event listener. And remember that when we clicked on this add button, the page started refreshing, meaning that the form was submitting. Also, this add button has the type of submit. Let's take a look in our HTML file again. And well, what am I doing? I don't need this section, but I need this section opened. And there we go. We have the type of submit to this add button. So we want to stop this because refreshing this web page will delete everything that we did here. So in order to stop that event, first of all, we need to listen to the event of submit. And when that event happens, we're going to fire up a function that is going to take hold of the event. Now let me show you this. I'm going to pass in the let's type in event. I'm usually using events, so also pro tip, in my opinion, you should use Eve or E. This is pretty much convention in JavaScript using that little E there instead of event. Now, let me show you what happens. So if I would console log here, the event itself, then it's going to show me whatever event is passed in this event. So if I would have here focus, then it's going to show me focus. If I would have here submit, then it's going to console log down here submit. So let me show you this. If I click on this, it will, well, it's gone. Did you see it down here? Let me click on it again. Boom, there it was. Now that is a problem. And in order to stop this, we have a pretty cool function called event.prevent default and open and close parentheses, because this is a function, a property of this event, and it's going to stop the event from happening. Now let me show you something. If I click now on add, it's going to stop the event. And you will see down here the event that was fired. Okay, so it was fired from the button, the type of submit, target form, so far and so on. Submit event. Now we did submit the event, but I also want to check if this little fellow right here is empty, because I don't want to submit empty information to our backend later on. Now in order to check this, we can use a if statement. So if the quantity dot value, remember we have access to the value, is equal to null, to nothing, oops, the type, missed here the type, then do something. And that something will be to alert me that add quantity. Okay, so let's try this out. So if this is empty, if this is empty, now first thing first, I'm going to assign it to an empty string, meaning there's nothing in there. And also here we're going to check if there's nothing in there. So if this is empty, then alert that the quantity is empty. So let's click in here, and there we go. We're going to have here the alert of quantity empty. Now this is also blocking our code. You can see I cannot scroll down here, I cannot do anything until I click here OK. Now if I type something in here and click add, this is working. So we need an else statement here. We have a if, oops, I just misspelled else. Else do something. Else we should, let's just console log for now, success. What we are going to do later on is actually add here a function. So let's type in here to do, add handle submit function. Also going to add here a function type. So if this is not empty, first of all, if it is empty, it's going to alert. If it is not empty, let's say free, it's going to console log success. Perfect. Now what I also want to do here is after I'm done with this, after I submit it, the value, it should clear up the form. And it's pretty simple. We're just going to reassign the quantity here to nothing. So let's click in here, add 5 pairs, click on add, and we'll see successful submission, and the input field was cleared. Again, if you want to submit it, we're going to get our error or the alert that the field is empty and we should add something to it. And this is called resetting the input field. Okay? You will see this multiple times when you're going to create different applications. Okay, so let's create a couple of variables. Now let's add a couple of variables and let's calculate then the discount. And for this, I'm just going to type in here First of all, create a variable. I'm going to use the const name from our variable, and we're going to call this item and price. Now we're going to use const because the price will not change. $9.99. The price is fixed. But what will change, so we're going to create here a variable using the let keyword, is the discount. I'm going to assign this to 1. So what I'm going to do here is calculate the discount when I'm typing in here something. And for this, we're going to use another event listener. So quantity.add event listener. I'm going to use here the on key up event listener. Basically, when I'm not pressing down, but when I'm releasing my key. And this will just call upon a function, and that function will then calculate the discount. Let's just use calc discount. Okay, open and close parenthesis. Now we do not have this function, so let's create it. We're going to go down here, function, and this function will calculate the discount using the function keyword. And let's add here how we're going to calculate the discount. First step is to identify using an if statement if the quantity.value is, just like it says here, more than 3. Actually, I'm going to use more or equal to 3. So in order to check if something is more than 3, then it has to be, first of all, more than 2. And, this is the logical operator, and the quantity.value should also be less or equal to 4. Now, if both of these statements are true, that the discount should be equal to 0.9, meaning 10%. So let me also demonstrate this by, at the end, we're also going to return the discount out of this function, because after this function is finished calculating, the discount value right here will be overwritten. The function will calculate, it will return the discount, and down here, let's say we're going to, before our return, we're going to console log the discount again. Okay, so basically down in the console, as soon as we pass in here something, let's say 1. Oh, sorry, I misspelled here the event listener. It's key up, not on key up. We're going to come back to on key up, but that's later on. So let's pass in here 1. We're going to say 1, execute it down here because this is the discount. Then let's say 3, and the discount just changed. It's 0.9 now. Why is this? Well, because we're more than 1. If I type in 2, once again 2, it's still 1 because it was reevaluated. Now, once this is assigned, the discount has now a new value. So let's add the conditions for the following values also. So what we have here, if we're at 3, we should have a 10% discount. Now we're going to continue on using else if another condition, the quantity.discount. Why did I actually want to remain at Q, but you see how long this is to to type out. But be specific, be always specific within your code. So if the quantity.value is greater or equal to 5 and the quantity.value is also less than 10, then we're going to have a discount of 0.85, meaning 15%. Now, another else if the quantity value is greater or equal to 10, then the discount should be 0.8, so 20%. And else, this is our final statement. If none of them are true, then the discount is 1. So let's try this out. Let's pass in 5, and we should get 85. Let's pass in 10, we should get 8. And let's pass in 2, and we should get 1. Let's pass in 3, we should get, oh, we're above 23. Let's press in 3, we're going to get 0.9. Okay, so this function is executing perfectly. I'm going to comment out this discount and the console log, and also comment out this console log. We have too many console logs. The success is going to live in there. This I'm going to comment out, and so forth and so on. So our console will remain a bit clearer. So next up, let's try to change the quantity using our buttons. In order to change the quantity in here using our buttons, we need to add event listeners to the buttons. Now we already grab onto our buttons from the DOM, so we have our plus, we have our minus. So let's add event listeners to them. So let's start with the minus one. Actually, let's start with the plus. Plus.add event listener, open and close parenthesis, and we're going to add the event listener of click. When this is fired, then a function should be fired that is going to change the quantity. So let's create this function. And also, you know what? I'm going to copy, paste this, and add the minus element also to it. Both of them have now an event listener of click to them. So let me also demonstrate this. I'm going to insert here the event, and I'm also going to pass down here the event, create this function, change quantity, pass in here also the event. So the event is just going to be passed down, passed in here, and let's console log the event. Again, I'm using E now. So if I click on the plus button, I should get event pointer from, does it show me the element? No, but what I want to show you is the event.class name. Okay, so we have our events. We see that both of them are working. If I click on minus, it's going to fire up. If I click on plus, it's going to fire up. So let's check here on what we are actually clicking on. And for this, I'm actually going to show you here console log e.target. So basically show me what I'm clicking on. Target. And if I click on the plus element, it's going to give me this. And click on the minus element, it's going to give me this. Now from this element, we do see that we have these classes, plus and minus. So dot, and select now the class name. And it should show me now plus and minus. Perfect. Now you just saw how I selected the class name. I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to ask it if the e.target, the event.target dot class list, not the name, class list, dot contains the class of plus, then the quantity dot value, and now I'm going to use the plus operator on it, which is going to mean that it's going to just add one to it. Now else, if it's not plus, it means that it's minus, and then the quantity dot value should be subtracted. So let's try this. Plus, and you can see I'm adding one each time I'm clicking on it, and minus will subtract one. Awesome, isn't it? Now one last thing. If I'm clicking here on minus and click once more after the 1, what do you think will happen? Well, we're going to get into that minus territory. We don't want that. Although we limited our input right here to not be negative, this just means that I cannot go down with the arrows on the, if I'm using my arrows now, I cannot go under the value of 0. But if I'm clicking this is going to execute. So what we can do is add a last functionality, a last condition, that if our quantity dot value is less than 1, then we're going to change the quantity dot value to 1. So let's try this out. We're at 0, 1, and we cannot go any further. So we can go upwards, but we cannot go downwards. Okay, so pretty cool, isn't it? Okay, now it's time to handle this submit. So let's start submitting our form. We did have up here the event list of submit on the form. And when we're submitting our form, well, first of all, it's going to check if there's something in there. If there is something in there, then we're going to have here a successful submission. So let's get rid of this successful submission. And I'm going to actually create a function that we're going to call handle submit. And this should then, we're going to move, where do I have our submit there. And we're going to, well, take out this comment. And there we go. And I'm going to move this function, this console log, into our handle submit function. So again, this should work exactly as it did before. When we click in here on add, it's going to, first of all, verify if there's something in there. If there is, then it's going to successfully submit the form. Perfect. Now, why am I using this handle submit? Well, because this is going to do multiple things. Not only that we're calculating here the discount when we're passing something in here, we should also calculate the discount when we're submitting the form. So for this, we need to take the calculate discount function and pass it into the handle submit form. So basically, we're going to call upon it once more when we are submitting it. So let me demonstrate this. Free add, and well, I don't have anything in here. So where did I have it? To calculate discount. Sorry, here it is. Let's comment back in this console log. So 6 and there we go. Successful for submission. And again, this was console logged. So once it was called upon when we're typing in here something, and then it's called upon our submission. Now, why am I doing this? Well, because we need another function that is going to calculate the final price. And I want the function to also take into consideration the discount, but for that, the discount must already be calculated. Again, the JavaScript function will be run synchronously. So bum, 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 bum. And if we don't have the new value of the discount, we cannot use it in our function that is going to calculate the final price. Okay, so let's do that next up. So let's calculate the final price. Let's go down here, create a function, call it calc final price. This will include the discount, remember. And for this, we're just going to return the item price times the quantity dot value and times the discount. So see, this is why we need this to be already calculated. And if I would use this down here in a console log, so in the console log, I will execute this, then I should see, let's see here, the final price, which is this. Okay, now I also want the display value to be the discount value to be displayed, and we're going to add here another function, display function. This is the second reason why I need the discount before I'm passing it in here as a final value. So function and display discount. Now, because we added 0.9 and 0.85 and so forth and so on, well, that's not the discount that we want to see here. We want to see percentages and we want to see them with minus. So we're going to create here again conditions. If something, then something should happen. And our if is that if the discount is equal to 0.9, then it should return a value as a string of minus 10%. Okay, and we can also console log this very quickly. Console log minus, oops, I have here, so minus 10%, and also in here, minus 10%. And now we're going to launch this function, we're going to initiate this function down here. So let's see, free and add, and we're going to get this minus 10%. Just as we have here in a finished project, when we're going to free add, we're going to have this minus 10% here. This is actually already calculated in our display discount and is going to be used in, well, later on when we're going to display everything in the DOM. Okay, so let's go back to our project. Now let's take the next condition. I'm going to comment this out. Else if the discount is equal to 0.85, then we should return the value in a string of minus 15%. What am I doing? Else if, you have another one. If the value, so is the discount is equal to 0.8, basically 20%, then we should return the string of 20%. And our last condition then is if, and this is very important, if there's nothing in there, so else, our last statement, then return nothing. Because if I only buy one pair of shoes, actually let me show you this in a finished project, only buy one pair of shoes or two pairs, then I'm not going to get any kind of discount. So we can see this is empty. Nothing will be inputted in here. So this is also very important. If I buy 3 pairs, then there we go. Okay, so our conditions are in here. All we need to do now is output everything to the DOM, exactly as we have it right here in our finished application. Now it's time to output our results to the DOM. In order to output our results to the DOM, we need to replace the HTML of our output element here. So our output, where do I have our output? Did I select my output? Well, guess what? We're going to select our output, const output, and we're going to go to the document, use. Now you can use, I'm going to use query selectors just to show you this. So output, then hash, because I'm going to grab onto the ID of output from this div. So output, the ID is equal to output. In order to select the ID, I'm going to use hash and output. This is the way you select output. ID is using query selector. You can obviously use get element by ID and you just have to type in the name of the ID. But if you're using query selector, you need to use the hash symbol, which signifies that this is a ID. So we got our output, our variable. I'm going to take out all of these console logs. And now let's grab onto the output, and now I can use the .inner HTML property on it, meaning that I can replace its inner HTML. And how can I replace it, or with what will I replace it? Well, I'm going to replace it with another div element. Yes, you heard me right. You can create elements within JavaScript and insert them in the DOM. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use template literals. So there's something called backticks that's on your keyboard, and it's either on a Mac left to the, no, sorry. On a Mac, it's right to the left shift key, And on a PC, it should be left to the top one key, where which one also has the exclamation mark. Okay, so not this simple quotes, but backticks. Now within here, we can type in actual HTML. So if I would create here, open and close div tag with the class of result, and I'm going to pass in here now variables. In order to use variables, you need to use the $, open and close curly brackets, and I can use here the quantity dot value, meaning that, let me show you here in the finished project, this is the quantity dot value, 3. I passed in here 3. If I pass in here 5 and hit enter, then I'm going to have 5 pairs times, so we need the times symbol, just going to pass in here space and X, then the item price, so we're using another variable. This means $, curly brackets, item price, exactly as we have it here. Then I'm going to create here a span tag. I'm going to give it the class of %, and within this span tag, I'm going to execute, open and close curly bracket, just as we used it for variables. I'm going to execute the display discount function, so open and close parentheses. Also, if you would just hover over it, you will see that the function will return one of these 4 things, either -10%, -50%, -20%, or absolutely nothing, depending on the conditions. Now, because the function is really long, please take into consideration that if this doesn't wrap, then you don't have word wrap activated, meaning you're going to go down here to manage, command palette, and then word wrap should appear. If it doesn't appear, just type in word wrap and just click on this. Now, I do have it activated, so I don't need to activate it. If I deactivate it, you can see it's trailing. It's going to go wee, and I don't want that. So I always want to have it activated, and you can also use Option Z on a Mac, and I believe it's Alt Z. Then after the span tag, we have our equal sign, because it is equal to what is it equal? Well, to the final price. So calculate, $, open and close curly brackets, calculate final price, open and close parentheses, because this is a function. And now let's try this out. So if I pass in here absolutely nothing, then I should get an alert. Excellent. If I pass in here 3 and add, there we go. There it is. But we have a problem. The problem is that this right here has too many numbers after the comma. So we can fix this by using a property that is specific to numbers. After the calculate final price, you can use the dot to fix it. And in here, you just pass in how many decimals you want to have after the comma sign. So if I pass in here again 4, and there we go, we just have 2 comma signs. Now, why is this ugly, and why am I missing a $, $, and $? Whoops, not this one, and $. Now it should have 5, and there we go, $. Also, this should have a $. What am I doing here? Where's our very first price? There we go, and $. So 5 pairs, $99 minus 50%. And also, let's check this out. If I would only buy 2 pairs, add, then it's gone. The discount is gone. You don't see any kind of discount. Okay, now we need to style it. Because you can see here, our results should look something like this. So as I promised, we're going to go back now to CSS and style this part. All right, so let's go back to our CSS. And down here, let's first of all grab onto the div with the ID. This is the way you select IDs of output. So hash, exactly as I told you. You can also select the ID of output without the div. I just wanted to show you that if you want to select a specific div with a specific ID, this is the way you do it. But one important thing that I didn't mention, when you're adding IDs, please don't use them as classes. You should add one ID, so one naming convention that is unique to the code. So if you had the ID of output, please do not use it anywhere else. IDs are kind of unique in their usage, so please don't overuse them. So all I want to do here is add a grid column of 1/3, meaning that it's going to meaning that it's going to be 1/3, and then a text align to the center. Next, I'm going to take the div. Again, I'm just going to show you this with the class of result. You can also use just result. What am I doing? Result. Sorry for the mistype. Result. And now let's start styling our results. So let's add here something. It's going to look like this. Now let's add a margin, all around margin with 0.5 rem, and this is just top and bottom, and 0 to the left and right. Now let's add a padding of 0.5 rem and 1 rem left and right. Then let's increase the font size of the text to 1.3 rem. You can always see the effects taking hold here. Then let's increase the font weight to 600. The border, let's add a border 1 pixel, solid, and hash 333. This is just a dark color. A border radius of 0.5 rem. And now let's add a background color, obviously the variable color of primary color. Now let's change the text color by typing a color and hash FFF. Let's add a box shadow of 0.15 pixels, 0.1 rem, 0.2 rems, and the primary color. Oops, why didn't it add var to it? Var, and there we go. And let's also use a max width that is going to be fit content. Okay, and it's not going to be larger because, as you saw, it was larger than its initial content. It will always have the max width of its content. So next up, let's take care of this little discount. For this, we're going to take the span with the class of %, and I'm going to decrease now its font size to only 0.8 rem, and also decrease its font weight to 400. And the last thing, I'm going to change the color to the secondary color. And there we go. And that's it for this part. Okay, so let's learn some refactoring. We have here a little project. The right side, we have here our code. To the left side, you can also download the code. Didn't I mention it that the code is downloadable? Yes. And now for refactoring. So what is refactoring? Well, it's actually rewriting the code in a more simpler and more effective way. What does it mean? Less code. At the end of the day, you should have less code. Now, there are a couple of things, for example, by event listeners. If I would take this event listener, add event listener of focus, then function, and then it should execute something. Now, let's do the same thing. Basically, I'm going to comment this out, meaning that my event listener here will no longer work. And let's add to this a on focus event. It's the same thing, event listener, focus, on focus. Then I'm going to assign it to an arrow function, is equal to, open close parenthesis, and a arrow. Now, if the arrow function has only one value to execute, then you can write in that value, or whatever should execute, quantity.value equal to nothing. Basically, if I click in here, it should then again assign the value of the input tag to an empty string. And there we go. So you can see one line of code instead of one. That's not 2, 3, but still much simpler. Okay, let's go to the next one, the event listener of submit. There are a couple of things here. First of all, ternary operators. We're going to replace this with a ternary operator. The ternary operator is, well, it kind of does the same thing, but it's much simpler. We're asking here the question if quantity.value, let's copy this, is an empty string. Now, the if statement will be replaced with a question mark, then alert, this right here. The else statement is replaced now with a column. Else, handle, submit. So let me comment this out and show you that it's going to have the same effect. So if this is empty and trying to submit, it's going to alert me with add quantity. If it's not empty, it's going to submit. But we need to make this even more simple. So I'm going to comment. Let me first of all copy this. You know what? Let's type in here a comment of refactored. Let's do it with a to-do. To-do, refactor. I'm just going to copy this, then add it down here and add this down here. And I'm going to delete this from here, comment this back in, and comment this entire thing out. So I'm going to delete the if statement, I'm going to delete the console log. I'm going to replace this with the on submit event is equal to a arrow function, but now we have multiple arguments. So I do need also delete this parenthesis down here. So I do need to open and close curly brackets. And it's going to do exactly the same thing, meaning that there's nothing in here, alert. If there is something in here, then calculate. Again, much simpler. And you also learned how the ternary operator works. Okay, let's move on. This line right here. Again, refactor. What can we do here? Again, these are pro tips. Pro tips. I'm going to copy this, edit up here once again, and comment it out. So how should this look? Well, on key up, arrow function, and execute that one line of code. And boom, there we go. This down here. This is going to be interesting. Let's add again refactor down here. Copy the function. I'm going to delete this, and this is going to be a bit more complex, but hey, this is how you learn ternary operators. Again, we're going to use the same thing that we have here. I'm just going to start copying things. So if this is true, question mark, then this count is equal to 0.9. Else, if this is true, question mark, the discount will be this right here. Again, else, if this is true, question mark, oops, don't need you there, then the discount is 0.8, semicolon, we have a very last else is this one. Hit save and comment this out, and you should get the same result. So 3, add, and there we go. 10, enter, there we go. 15, still 20 because we're above 10. What else do we have? This is going to be a really cool one. Check out the entire lines of code here. I'm going to reduce it to a fraction, what you see here. Pretty simple how you can do this. So let's do refactor. First of all, I'm going to create another variable here, const, and call it buttons. Document. And now I'm going to use query selector, but I'm going to use query selector all. I'm going to select all of the buttons. This being an application, it has just a couple of buttons, so I'm not going to select 10,000 buttons at once. Now I'm going to use on the buttons, because they're multiple, a for each loop. I'm going to loop over each of the buttons and use a callback function that is going to take each one of the button. So for each button, I'm going to use an arrow function. I don't even need the curly brackets. Let's leave them in there. I'm going to add to each button an on-click event. That on-click event will then have an arrow function going to pass in the event. And I'm going to look for if the e.targets exactly as we had it up here contains the plus class. And now I'm going to use another type of ternary operator. This is very short. This is a if statement and else nothing. So basically 2 times ampersand. If this is true, then just do a quantity.value plus plus, copy, paste. If this is minus, then just do a minus minus. Also, let's use a ternary operator on our on our condition that the value of the quantity should not be less than 1. Again, pretty simple. If it's less than 1, then quantity.value is equal to 1, meaning that it's not going to less than 1. What am I doing here? I need to wrap this into parentheses, and there we go. And let me comment this part out. You can see instead of having, wait just a second, I also replaced those two, so 2 lines of code, then 1, 2, okay, so 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish. I don't count those. So 7 plus the 6 are 13 lines of code with just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. So I think that this is, let's try the arrows. So this is working. This should not let us go underneath of 1, and let's do 11 here, and there we go. This is still working. This right here I'm going to leave up to you. You have to do here a couple of ternary operators. So pretty cool. This is how ternary operators work. This is how arrow functions work. And this is how you can exceptionally reduce your code by refactoring it. So hope this was helpful.